Call our meeting to order and all rise and say the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I know we have a motion. We have a motion to amend the meeting minutes of the work session for June 22nd. We call for that motion, so then we can adopt the agenda, the consent agenda as a total, which would include that amendment.
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, and the motion is to add a qualification on a remark by Councilman Wyndham, that he advised the council that he had been told that a commissioner was going to advance the resolution that we had passed. So just an amendment of that he was told. Okay, so can I get a motion? Well, we got a motion. We have a second. Okay, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Can I get a motion to accept the agenda to include the consent agenda? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. Mayor's announcements again. I'll just quickly say that it's our understanding that the Board of Commissioners will be voting this evening on the intergovernmental agreement for the 2023 Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax, SPLOST, that includes a division of $108 million projected over 6 years. So would be a 6-year SPLOST, and that the division would be 78% of the funds received would go to the county, and 22% will be divided among the cities in accordance with their share of the city population. Any excess funds collected above the $108 million would be allocated according to the same formula, 78%, 22%, just as with the normal allocation. So hopefully we will have word that they pass that, and then all the cities will sign, and we'll get that out. It's due to the state. It's my understanding it's due to the state by the 4th of August, and then that will get it on the ballot for November. So that's the latest on that. I think that was the only concern. Anything else, Bill, that you want to talk about? I was going to say announcements. I think that was it. Okay. Great. We will open it up for any citizens' concerns. Anyone have any concerns? Would like to step forward to the mic and express their
I have a concern.
citizens' concern?
So I just had a concern.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You have to step around.
Do I really?
No.
Okay. I mean, I will.
I'm teasing.
I already shared it with Chief Anglin that my daughter came up to the stop at the Little League fields, and there were 3 motorcycles in the opposite lane, all stopped together talking, and they were looking at her, and as soon as she turned the corner, they took off racing down City Pond Road. So I just wanted to say, it may have been an isolated single time, but they were obviously racing. They were in both lanes as soon as they took off. And that's dangerous because that hill does that, it's blind. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, let you know that that happened, and maybe hopefully it was an isolated event. I did see a Covington police car sitting there in the Little League parking lot, kind of by the trees. So, obviously that presence will make a difference. So thank you for sharing that if you did that.
No problem, you're welcome.
Great, thanks. Appreciate it. Anything else?
It's the biggest dangerous bit of the road. Almost got whack coming out playing tennis because somebody decided they passed. And,
Oh my gosh.
you have to be on your toes on weed road, not road, or on the back.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we will move on. The next item on the agenda is to approve a memorandum of agreement with Northeast Georgia Regional Commission for their assistance with the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Program grant application preparation. It's $1,000 for them to support us in applying for this grant. Again, the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Program grant is provides grants that range from $500,000 to $3 million with a 25% match. And we have learned that the $900,000 congressional earmark that we received can be used as a match for those funds, which is good. So if we went for the $3 million, I think that's a $650,000 match, somewhere around there. I don't know what the match is. Anyway, so that is good. But we do want to go ahead and get y'all's formal approval on the MOA so we can get the Northeast Georgia folks working on that proposal.
You need a motion before discussion.
This discussion.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I had also thought that our purchase of the land counted as part of our, match.
I'd have to review, I think you may have noticed, or you may have gone to the thing more recently, there is a certain number of months leading up to your application
Okay.
that expenditures, including acquisition of land, can be used, but I can't remember whether it was 12 months or 18 months or 6 months.
It was 18 months, but just,
Yeah, which would be, it would qualify as well, but
maybe wrong, but it seemed like it was 18.
if nothing else, it certainly strengthens our grant request. If we go for $3 million, we could say we spent a considerable amount on land acquisitions, and we've gotten this congressional, and yes, we have cooperation from the city of Covington, et cetera, that these are things, and nonprofits like Duke Trails and Sustainable Newton that support it. So, but that's a good point. We'll
Because
confirm
even if
that.
it doesn't fall in our matching percentage, it's still important to point out, as you said.
Yes, sir.
Is this part of the back and forth exchange between you and Bill and John Vine that I saw in an email that I found totally confusing?
So, short answer is no.
No,
No.
that's a different thing altogether.
So, but just to explain though, there is another funding program, the Transportation Alternatives program, that also has a match requirement for it, that we were being encouraged by John Devine, who had been encouraged by the Georgia Department of Transportation, or asked by the Georgia GDOT. They knew he had a network of people who did alternative transportation stuff. They said, can you help get the word out to local governments to apply for these funds? Because we're going to lose them if we don't get them, to folks. So that was more of him encouraging us to take a look at it. And then we had some questions about it. Well, how did it relate to the overall funding of the trail project? We're going to have a meeting. Bill is sitting down with Atkins, and we're looking at that funding program, the GOSP, and the congressional, in terms of how we best leveraging all three of those, and possibly applying for the TA program as well as the GOSP.
And second question, at one point in the last couple of months, we talked about the DDA returning some land to the city. Would that have any effect on all of this stuff that they went ahead and did it now, or when, or do they still plan to do it, or is it?
That would be an important thing to happen before the application, because it shows community partnerships, since DDA is an autonomous entity. So when we discussed it before I left DDA, they were talking about, yes, the piece behind Orna Villa could be given back to the city by DDA as a chunk, a gift from, a separate entity, which helps bolster the grant when it shows we've got material partnership.
Can we move forward with that?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had explicit conversation with them about that, but we can talk to them about it at their August meeting. that the council is interested in. I mean, we don't have it on the agenda, we could put it in our work session as well to discuss whether we want to formally request that of the DDA, that given that it's not being developed, and no plans to develop it, that they could return that. Are we talking about you want the whole 6.5 acres, or just a section that would be?
That's just hand in hand, I see no point in not doing it.
I mean, the only stipulation that the DDA seemed to collectively feel was that, you know, it would be used as an entry point for the trail, a natural parkland entry point for the trail, accessible to the downtown district, which is logical.
Which I think is, yeah,
You know, so
consistent with what we talked
It
about.
augments the downtown development area by having this access to a natural space.
Okay.
I mean, that's what we had talked about, was that it was beneficial to DDA in that way.
That was not, that wasn't a vote-taking
No,
session.
it wasn't, it was just discussion.
It was discussion to see how the DDA would feel about it, et cetera. But there has been no other contact in regards to that. The last was about, you know, if you guys could do this, this would help us with the blah, blah, blah. And that's about as far as.
Okay.
So you're
So we'll put it on the work session agenda to kind of make it more of a formal discussion, and then we'll request it, they meet the third Thursday, fourth Thursday, Tuesday, so they'll talk about it hopefully on their August meeting, and we can formally make
Is
that
that work
request.
session before they meet?
Yeah, it's on the, 15th.
And finding a couple of DDA members, well, that's what that would.
Yeah, that's another thing we definitely want
What's
to.
that? I didn't hear that.
Getting additional DDA members so that they have a quorum to be able to take official action. They have to have 4 present, and they currently only have 4 on currently serving. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. All right. Next item is consideration of holding the FY 2023 city millage at the same level as the FY 2022 rate. We discussed keeping the millage rate for this year at 5.444 mils, which does reflect an increase in the valuation of properties in Oxford, so therefore we will have levied an increase in amount of taxes will be levied. But I do want to clarify, we're not raising the tax rate of the millage rate. We are merely holding it steady, and so as that we can continue to increase revenue for the general fund, which where we have seen increases in expenses over the past few years. So if I can get a motion on holding the millage rate at 5.44 for mills.
What would be, never mind, I'll wait till you get your motion.
Make a motion that we hold the village rate at 5.44 mils.
Can I get a second? Okay, discussion?
What is the alternative to holding it and drop it?
I'm sorry, what is the alternative
What
to?
would be the effect of not increasing our taxes? The taxes are going to go up, whether we call it an increase or do not call it an increase, it does not matter.
Right.
The homeowners will be paying more taxes.
Right.
Is there any, what's the effect of us doing things that would not increase the cost and taxes to the homeowner?
Well, I mean, part of the issue is paying the bills that we have under the general fund, which are paid by property taxes along predominantly with the local option sales tax and the insurance premium tax. So those are the largest pieces of that budget. So any reduction in the amount of revenue that we get from taxes levied within the city of Oxford associated with property values is we would have to find where we're reducing expenditures. The overall change, difference is it was about $140,000 in revenue, taxes levied from last year, and by holding it steady based on the changes in assessments, it's about 184, so that's a 44, just under $44,000 additional revenue that we would receive based on holding the rate at 5.444.
What percentage of the general expenses does the tax cover? And what is, the property tax cover, what is the rest of it come from?
Property tax historically has been right about 10% of our overall budget. So that's the effect that you would have.
The overall budget or the budget?
10% of the revenues for general fund?
No,
It can't be, if we only get $140,000 a year in taxes, there's no way that can be 10% of our revenue we receive.
I think it's 10% of the general fund.
Maybe not a little further.
10% of the general fund, but we're still taking that money out of the general fund by a rollback.
So the total,
Bottom line is that the taxes are going to increase. I don't care how you put it. Is that
so I mean,
homeowners are going to pay more in taxes this year than they paid last year by about 30%. That's the bottom line.
right, and we provided the estimate of what that impact would be on a household of $100,000. That's in the ad. If you could bring that up for a value of $100,000, that will increase their property taxes for Oxford by $37.62, or roughly $3 a month.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying, either way you go, it's a 30% increase. I don't care whether you got a $100,000 house or a $600,000 house, 30% increase.
Yes, but Oxford's rates are, the share of Oxford tax is relatively low. You're talking again, I'm not trying to belittle that percentage amount, I'm just saying we're talking $3 more a month for a $100,000 home for the city of Oxford.
Fixed income, I don't care if it's $3, $4, $5, or $50. That comes from somewhere.
and as I said earlier, that is one thing homeowners have the least control over. And, if you don't mind, I'm not through.
I was going to answer your question, Chair.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. So the budget for 2023, the total revenue for the general fund is $1.3 million. The real property tax budget amount is $135,000, roughly 10% of the revenue projected for the general fund is coming from property taxes. So, if you look at over time, you look at all the things that are in the general fund, in terms of expenditures, including the creation of a new Parks and Recreation fund, and the allocation of personnel to that fund that were previously being allocated to utilities, but because rightfully so, they're picking up yard debris and cutting grass and those sorts of things, then we have seen an increase in our general fund expenditures, i.e. the cost of the general government work, and so we have to find revenue to cover those increasing costs or find ways to reduce those costs. So, this year we actually had to do an interfund transfer to balance the general fund because it was projected to be at a deficit when you look at revenue over expenditures.
That has always been the case.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. The last 3 years has not been the case.
Unless we do some.
No, the last 3 years, it has not been the case. I believe I'm correct, last 3 years. It's been the last, I believe it started, I think,
We have to transfer any funds into the general fund from our enterprise funds in the last 3 years.
when you look at the revenue versus expenditures for the general fund, not including transfer of funds, the general fund has reached a point of actually of excess with this in the previous year, FY22, and had roughly been broken even in FY21, and I believe in FY20 was like maybe just shy of being at zero balance.
What is the issue? Is there a legal issue in transferring it from enterprise funds into the general fund? What is the issue there? I mean, other than accounting ties?
I think part of it is transparency and accuracy in terms of, paying for government, paying for the services of maintaining the city. And if we don't generate that revenue through property taxes, then we're taxing people through their utility consumption. It's still a tax. They're still paying it. They're paying it. They're just going to pay it on their utility bill, or they're going to pay it in a equal distribution of the same amount every month in their mortgage payment or through their rent. But they're going to pay it one way or the other.
The homeowner, the resident homeowner, that is one thing that they have some control over. They can take steps to do something about that expense. They cannot take steps to do anything about taxes. And that's just a fact of life. And the things that we've done traditionally to try to keep things in line for the homeowner, we didn't, I think there's been 2 or 3 years or 4 years, George could tell me,
About 40 years.
that we have not increased the utility rates, and we have tried to avoid increasing taxes, and we just went through the whole process of not doing the COVID, of trying to take steps to help people get through that. We now have a higher inflation rate and a higher cost of living rate, and now we're going to come forward with the taxes, and I just cannot seem to get comfortable with it.
Again, they can't themselves change the electric rate that we charge them, and they can't themselves change the water and sewer rate that we charge them. Yes, they can change how much they use, but the rate that we charge them will have to reflect the cost of running the government. So of the city of Oxford. So I mean, if we're talking, to use a phrase, stealing from or borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, you're not being, in my view, transparent about where you're paying for general government expenses. We've increased the amount of land that the city owns and that the city maintains, both in terms of formally on parks, but also in how much right-of-way we're mowing. I mean, and we're taking on more ambition with reducing invasive species. We're trying to do a lot more, and it requires a lot more to run the city. And so, the expenses of general government have gone up. So where are you going to pay for that? Are we going to pay for it with property taxes where they rightfully should be paid, or are we going to pay for it with a tax on their utilities? Because that's what that is. Let's call it, it is a tax.
Well, I don't think that's not precise. I mean, that may be where the money's coming, but that's not a tax. This is a tax.
Any margin on, any additional fee that is imposed on the amount of utility rate that is above the cost of providing that utility, how is that not a tax?
Well, I don't know, let's ask Georgia Powell.
We're not served by Georgia Power. I'm saying, how is it not a
That's
tax?
not my point. That's not my point.
it is above the cost of delivering that service, then it is a tax.
Well, let's just agree to this.
It's either a tax or it's profit, you know, I mean, we don't operate in a profit.
I don't think we normally call your margin, I call it, as a tax. I mean, on anything, if you make more than, if you sell it more than you pay for it, that's not a tax that you get, that's a profit you
You can play
get.
that game, but it is.
I have to go back and look at the actual definition of tax to see if that's a tax. I don't think it is, but I have to look up the definition.
But it smells like a rose, it looks like a rose.
We're not gonna get any, I don't think we're gonna solve whatever, because my opinion will stay what it is as far as
Sure,
the rollback rate is.
sure,
I don't know how long we're talking about,
sure,
because I've gone through this enough.
I
And
understand.
I don't know if Kim will change his mind or not, so I still everybody will go ahead and vote. Because we keep going back and forth, and nobody's gonna change their mind. If you're not gonna change yours,
I didn't know that.
and I'm not gonna change mine, and I don't think Kim's gonna change his.
I told you, know, I'm flexible.
Well, yeah, I know that, but see, we have to show you how to change. I mean, I'm flexible too, if I'm giving something, I mean, I'm not just saying, that's just gonna be, I mean, if you can prove to me that my position is wrong, Kim and I know that all the time, we change it a minute, if you can prove to me mine wrong, I go through this just about every year, and we talked about this a long time ago. Things that raising taxes, it's more or less the stigma of raising taxes. If we don't raise taxes, we said a long time ago, we need to be able to tell our constituents why we need to raise taxes. And if you look at our revenue, it'd be kind of hard for us to penetrate that.
So it bothers me that we say raise taxes. I know the monetary bottom line is higher, but we're not really raising the tax rate at all. You know, it's just
Right.
staying the same. It is the fault of the housing market that is raising the taxes in this case. So, and also people can choose not to consume as many utilities no matter what their tax is. You know, I mean, if they want to knock $3 off their monthly bills, that's to save their Oxford tax increase. You know, they can do that by reducing their consumption. I always look at you because you're like, I'm like facing, I'm not like targeting you. I'm speaking in general. But they can choose. I mean, every time I get my utility bill, I go, dang it, we got to tighten up a little bit better. You know, and we can choose to do that, to follow through with that or not. I mean, there it is. So, I mean, that's a choice.
So, and I think analogous to this is this. When you get a raise in how much you make, like let's say last year you made $100,000 a year, and this year you make $120,000 a year, and your income tax rate if it stayed the same, say 20%, I'm just using a number, you are going to pay more in income tax, dollar amount, but no one's going to say they raised my taxes. No, you got more value for your work. You got more money for your work. In this case, your house now has more value. Therefore, you will pay more for property taxes. But we did not change your rate if we keep it at 5.44. So we're not raising your taxes. We are keeping the rate at which your taxes are assessed at the same level. And the market's determining what that value, and the tax assessor's office is determining what that value is.
So to me, speaking to constituents, I can honestly say we're not raising your taxes. The housing market has raised the bottom line that you pay, but that's not what we're doing up here. We're not raising taxes. The housing market is. You know, as far as their bottom dollar amount. The rate's the same.
All that, I understand every bit, I know exactly how all this works, I know exactly how. I understand, why did they come up with the rollback rate in the first place? Why did the county institute that, you know?
Rollback rates are intended to essentially make increased assessments of value revenue neutral, and thereby, or essentially not have any adverse impact in the sense of costing people more.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what I had heard is, this was all created by Governor Roy Barnes as a way to screw local governments, because he was ticked off about the way there were different definitions of taxes and state taxes and all this. And the rumor was back in the days, Roy Barnes did this is a semantic way of getting back at local governments. Because prior to Roy Barnes changing the law, this was not called a tax increase by the state of Georgia. You did not have to do 3 public hearings and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, but that answers your question. It was,
I'm not arguing about whether we raise the taxes or not raising taxes. You know, all I'm saying is that that's an increase to the homeowner, whether it's raised taxes or increased by the market. One way or the other, it's an increase to the homeowner. Then he will eventually, hopefully realize, or will his children will realize when he dies and they get to settle. And I hope my kids enjoy what little bit they'll be. But it is an increase to the homeowner, regardless. You call it whatever you want to call it. I'm not saying you're increasing your taxes, that's just semantics, if you say. But it's a cost to the homeowner. And he has no control over that cost. And I can tell you right now, it doesn't mean beans to a landlord, not beans, because all he's gonna do is go up on the rent. And they pay it out of that, they're not gonna keep that property up any better. I've been in real estate, your dad was in real estate, I've seen too many people, they suck all the goodie out of the house, and then they sell it and move on. And that's been proven time and time again. Now, some of these big organizations, they'll keep it because they can roll it through various shell corporations to keep the depreciation going and all that kind of junk. But your typical guy or lady that owns residential rental property, they're not gonna do it. They're not gonna do any more than absolutely that. But you call it what you want to call it. In the past, we tried to do rollback rates to try to keep it down. That's what I think in this particular situation. I don't have any objection to paying taxes. I don't have any objection to the fact that it goes up and it costs me more. But I'm thinking of the other people out there that are on more of a fixed income than I am. I'm on a pretty fixed income. I'd like to be able to eat when I'm 90 if I make it that long.
Well,
So I mean, you know, I'm not arguing about what it's called. I'm arguing about the net effect on the homeowner. That's all I'm arguing about. And with the utility rates, typically they can do something about it. They can feel like they have some effect, and we can help them do certain things about it. That's all I'm saying. Whether you call it a tax increase or don't call it a credit, I couldn't care less.
Councilman Wyndham, I mean, my intention is to lower our electricity rate so as to provide some relief to people. Because when I knocked on just about every door in Oxford, the main comment I heard was my utility rate's high. And I heard it typically from, people that probably were, had lower income levels than maybe many of us sitting here. And so, I think that's where I'm concerned, is to lower our utility rates, particularly for our residential customers, because we've looked at the fact that Oxford is actually quite high relative to the other cities and Georgia Power and the EMCs in Georgia. We are a relatively high rate for residential users. So it's my intent to come to bring to you all a suggestion of lowering that as we work through with Electric Cities of Georgia. So, because I believe that we put too much of the cost of general government into our electric utility rate to cover shortfalls there, and we should raise the revenue where it is appropriate to raise it, which is through property taxes. A value-based tax versus a consumption-based tax, which is a regressive tax.
I say this, and then I won't say anything else. What you just said goes back to what you said earlier. Well, you pay the electric rate, you pay the taxes. It's going to be the same thing. Now you say you want to lower the electric rate, but you're going to raise the tax on the homeowner, so it's going to still be the same thing based on what you said a while ago. So either way you go, you're talking about the same thing. If you're going to lower electric rates and raise taxes, then you still the same thing. Now, if so, instead of doing that, if you lower taxes, you don't have to worry about trying to lower electric rate, just don't raise it anymore. But again, you said that you're either pay it on the utility or you're gonna pay it in taxes, so I just brought that up.
I mean, my intention will be if you own property and live in Oxford, it will not cost you more to live in Oxford. But if you own property in Oxford and you don't live here, and we have quite a few people that do, then you will pay more in property taxes because the cost of maintaining city services is increasing. But if you are a renter, you will see some relief because you're the one paying the utility bill. And that's kind of where I'm coming from that. But I mean, I think that as important as anything is transparency and being clear. You look at how our electric utility rate is calculated, there's this number that comes from us, which is the dollar amount that we want them to plug into the equation to account for the transfer of funds from the electric utility to the general fund. And we need to, it's in the rate still, because we've given them consistently the same number.
Yeah, but I thought you said we didn't have to transfer anything from our enterprise funds anymore.
The fact that it's in your rate doesn't mean we actually did it. It means that it was collected. It was collected as revenue.
Okay.
Well, we've been receiving emails from ECG, and Marcia can attest to this, I don't know if you get them, Mayor, but about lowering our PCA or taking our PCA to zero. And I didn't know that I had the authority to do that. And I went back and forth with them. They said, no, you absolutely not only have the authority, you need to do it. So when we lowered it back to zero, we went from the 5th highest utility for residential customers at the base level to, I believe, the 11th highest. But beyond, and so I think what the mayor is saying is that we still have a structure below that PCA that's still accounting for the idea that we are transferring money because that rate structure is still hasn't been adjusted. But I mean, more largely, I guess, I mean, just to hear me out here, that as I understand it, like our water and sewer rates are based on Newton County's Water and Sewer Authority rates. Like, our rates to operate our water and sewer system are our costs, not what Newton County does. I mean, we get a bill from them, but then we have costs separate from that. And so if our rates are matching Newton County's Water and Sewer Authority rates, I mean, they're in some sense just as relevant to us as what they're charging in Indianapolis. I mean, we have costs that are specific to here. And so what I'm hearing is that when we have someone tap into sewer and they pay the capital charge to tap in our sewer, they're not paying us enough to even cover the cost of the tap. So why don't we have a tap fee that literally doesn't cover the cost of the physical tap? I mean, that makes no sense. It's because we're matching some other government's tap. Because they probably have equipment and a crew that can do it themselves. But so their costs are not our costs, but yet we're charging the same amount. We're doing that for our water and sewer rates too. And then we were talking to Charles Hall today, and he said we moved $500,000 from water a while ago, I guess just to the general capital fund. And we shouldn't be moving water from a utility like that in the general fund. And now we were going to move $700,000 from just the big capital budget, capital reserves, back into water. And so you've got these crazy gyrations of $500,000 being moved and then $700,000 being moved back. Meanwhile, you've got a capital revenue stream that literally bears no resemblance to your reality of cost. And neither does our rates, I'm sure, because our rates are based on another government's rates, another entity's rates. So, I mean, I'm still trying to understand this here, but I know that from my past work, and y'all partly hired me because of my past experience. I mean, I hate to wade into this giant argument, but I know the American Water Works Association has a very strict code. I mean, it's not a law, but developers can take you to court. If you have a water and sewer rate that's not reasonably related to your cost, you can be sued. And sometimes quite successfully by a developer saying, why are you charging me this? So our rates probably no one would ever sue about because they're actually artificially low, but I'm just saying that historically what you're doing is perfectly legal. I mean, Charles has made that clear, and I'll make it clear. There is no legal question about moving money around from these different funds, but you can see Porterdale is now probably charging one of the highest tax rates in the state of Georgia because they got behind on what they were supposed to be paying water and sewer rates. They probably didn't, I'd be willing to bet you $500 for my own money that they probably did not have a water and sewer rate capital component charge in the regular bill and probably weren't charging the right tap fees. Got way behind on their money, and then started shuffling money around. They're using water and sewer to pay other bills, and now they're having to use general fund to pay water and sewer. So there seems to be a real problem with us kind of saying this is this money and this is this money. What we're doing is we're taking it all in and stirring it and then throwing it all around. I mean, but you absolutely have the authority to do all that. It's just, I can assure you that, long term though, that's not necessarily a healthy strategy for your funds.
Well, I don't want to follow Porterdale's example. They have their own sense of uniqueness, as it were, which I don't like to use unique that way, but
yeah, you're right. Every government is unique.
Let's go ahead, just if there's any additional comments from the council, then we'll go ahead and vote, take a vote on it. Because like, to your point, we're not changing minds and we're just gonna.
well, I want to say one thing.
Yeah, no, I said additional comments.
When people complain to me about taxes and our utility rates, I point to what we have done with that money. And that generally changes minds. This building was built with excess electrical monies because it came out of that fund that we had to pay into. They were giving us credit every month for that. And if had we not set aside to do capital projects like this, right, wrong, and different, this building would not be here. The maintenance facility would not be there. It would still be that trashy barn that it was to begin with. And that park would not be down there that everybody loves. People that don't, the dental assistant that my dentist talked about today, and they don't live in Oxford, they live close. So I point to what we do with the money. And I have to tell them why we're buying the land. Why do we need so much land? We have a purpose for that. We're not just buying land. So, to me, if you say it comes out of this pocket, it comes out of that pocket, as long as we can give them something of value back to the citizens of Oxford and we can point to it, then to me, we're doing the right thing. And I'm ready to vote.
I mean, just really one last thing is that I think it's also valuable to point out to constituents that over 29% of the millage rate goes to county and schools. I mean, 5.44 is like little. I mean, so people go, my taxes, gosh darn it. Well, 29% of that is not coming to Oxford. We're not.
I use that too.
Yeah, I mean.
Right, but I think that's important for people to know because people talk about their taxes and what the heck is Oxford doing with all that money. We're not doing much. We're getting a tiny piece of that tax pie.
But we're doing a lot with that utility
Yes.
excess.
Yes.
A lot with that utility excess.
But I mean, just focusing strictly on the millage rate, I mean, a very small ratio of that actually is Oxford's.
But that is the game that we play because if we had to operate on taxes, we wouldn't be here.
No,
It's
of
just that
course.
simple.
Of
So,
course. No,
Council
it's
Ray,
not.
do you have any final comments or questions?
No, I think that we need to move on, sir.
Okay.
Oh,
Can't-
thank you.
Council Holt, anything further from you? You good? You good? Are you good? Okay. You good? Okay. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor of the holding the millage rate at 5.444 mils, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay. The votes of 4-2. So we will hold the millage rate at 5.444. I do appreciate all of you and all the discussion we had about it as well. That doesn't ever come across
Just for the record, the nays are George
George and Jim.
and Jim.
Thank you. All right, invoices. basically went back to what we had been doing previously, which is ensuring that every 4 years we've gone through and trimmed every line, along every line in the city. So we had gotten behind on that, so this current contract brings us back into that same rate of tree trimming. But we have had a lot of trees down, so there's also it's an expense there as well. Not
Yeah, but these are not people.
Not the
who are
perfect,
down
not the
trees.
perfect, no. This is just the trimming around the fire lines.
And then the contract is, piggybacked on.
Yeah, we piggybacked on the codes contract, absolutely. Any questions on the invoice? Everybody good? If you have any questions afterwards, don't hesitate to let us know. Okay. We need to just go into executive session to discuss real estate matters. When we come out, we're not going to vote on anything, but, so if anyone is listening and wants to go on about their business code, feel free to do so or stick around. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?